Rachel Bagaris with Panduit is my guest today. Rachel, thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions concerning electrical safety in the data center, if you don't mind. And if I could, I'd start at the top, so to speak, with what's common. So wondered if you could explain for us sort of some of the common or most common electrical hazards that one might find in a data center.
Sure. So similar to any other area with electricity in a data center, you could potentially have arc flash, shock, and fire. I think traditionally arc flashes probably gets more attention because it can be very dramatic. But shock, if you look at the overall injury, shock causes a lot of injuries and death, and it has a lot of long-term lasting effects. So we can't forget about shock and only talk about arc flash. I think another thing specific to data centers that we see in terms of hazards is there seems to be a trend towards moving towards higher voltages. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you are looking specifically at incident energy, higher voltages can sometimes lower that, but then of course your shock is still a concern, especially in areas where with a data center, you may have people who are electrically qualified working right alongside people who maybe are not as aware of those electrical hazards.
Rachel, thank you for that information. What it brings to mind is I know Panduit has a vast customer base across all industries, and including data centers, and wondered if you wouldn't mind sharing with us some of what you're seeing in terms of trends specifically in electrical safety in data center environments.
I think one of the biggest trends would be around remote monitoring and keeping people away from hazards. So if you think about it, protecting yourself from electrical hazards, the easiest way to do that is to keep doors and covers closed, keep people away from the areas with the highest energy and the highest hazards. So there are a variety of technologies that are enabling this. We're seeing, in terms of remote monitoring, more pieces of equipment are becoming connected, but also things like absence of voltage testers, where traditionally you may have had to suit up in your PPE and be exposed to electrical hazards when you're testing for absence of voltage, just to prove your equipment was de-energized. Now with absence of voltage testers, you can press a button and you can get the information about the status of voltage before you even have to be exposed to hazards. So these are definitely trends that are increasing electrical safety in the data center space.
Thanks again, Rachel. I guess life is full of trade-offs, right? And in data center space, sometimes safety and productivity could be seen as sort of trade-offs for each other. But I wondered if you have some advice for data center practitioners, technicians, and so on about that balance, striking the balance between safety and productivity in the data center space.
So I think first you have to remember that they're not mutually exclusive. They can work together. Oftentimes, I think it is by just removing complexity from some of our processes, they become inherently safer. So things like risk assessments, particularly in the data center where you have that combination of electrically qualified and non-qualified people maybe working together, you have to think about, how can everyone accomplish their tasks safely and as quickly as possible with minimum delays? So removing complexity, looking for those safer options are really great ways to do that. In terms of, I mentioned earlier, absence of voltage testers, we see those deployed all the time in data center, particularly in the gray space, in switchboards, switch gears, PDUs, but even things like generators and your HVAC controls, UPSs and automatic transfer switches. And this is something that even the gear OEMs are factory installing. This can be something that's available globally.
Thanks again, Rachel. I'll just wrap up by asking if there's anything else that I should have asked already, any other information that's worthwhile to share with our audience.
I just like everybody to think about and remember that it is never too late for safety. So it's often easier and even more economical to incorporate safety and plan for it early in the design, but you can use prevention through design or your risk assessment and safety by design techniques anytime that you identify a hazard in your data centers. So particularly with electrical safety, when we think about electrical incidents, they can be very low frequency, but considerably high consequence. So, the medical costs, the equipment costs, the capital costs. If you have an electrical incident, it's not something that is a minor event. So a lot of these electrical safety technologies like very safe absence of voltage testers can easily pay for themselves. So definitely, use that prevention through design approach. Think about safety and perform your risk assessments, and remember, it's never too late.
Excellent. Rachel, thank you again. I really appreciate this helpful information. Cabling installation and maintenance, Lightwave, Data Center Frontier, those brands, the audiences of those brands really appreciate the information you've provided to us here today. Thank you again.
Thanks.